Aloha, I'm Lyla Berg. Thank you for tuning into Island Focus. Every October, our country celebrates Free Speech Week because freedom of speech is one of the fundamental rights of a vibrant, representative democracy. We're broadcasting the show remotely from my home again, so you can meet the leaders in Hawaii who help to maintain that right on community television. Mahalo for joining us on Island Focus. Today on Island Focus, you will enjoy meeting Mike Wassenaar, who is President and CEO of the Alliance for Community Media. Thank you for being with us, Mike.
Aloha, it's good to be here.
You know, from the national perspective, freedom of speech is more than critical. It's an essential part of our democracy. And definitely from Washington, D.C., you have your challenges there now. Can you explain to us a little bit more about what your organization does and how does it affect us here in Hawaii?
Well, we at ACM support and protect public educational and government channels across the country that provide information about local government, provide educational information, and provide local speech, cultural information, religious information, of a variety of different perspectives. So we work with hundreds of channels across the country, like yours in Hawaii, like Ōlelo, where we are today, and the other channels that represent other counties in Hawaii, like Hauike and Hawaii, Naleo in Hawaii, and Akaku and Maui. All of those organizations actually are members of our national organization. Mm-hmm. We represent basically communities from Maui to Maine, all across the country that are interested in providing civic information about what's happening with local government, cultural information about what's happening in local communities, and providing really key speech that you cannot find on commercial television channels or in other avenues. They're providing key information that communities need. As well, they're allowing and enabling people who may not have resources and power to be able to communicate with others. It's, I think, an extremely important thing to be thinking about in this day and age. If you have a lot of power, you can get a lot of access to the microphone, but people can't necessarily see you. One of the key aspects of public educational and government channels across the country is that we provide production capacity for individuals and organizations of all stripes, of all sects, of all political beliefs, to be able to communicate back to local communities. And that's something I think it's extremely important in this day and age, when it often seems like what you're seeing on the media comes from anywhere or nowhere. It doesn't necessarily have a sense of identity or a sense of place or a sense of belonging. I think it's extremely important for people to have a sense of belonging when they are thinking about the media that they consume. So I think one of the reasons why people are kind of profoundly alienated by a lot of things that they see on television or they listen to on radio is a lot of the content that they're getting isn't from a world that they understand or a world that they're part of or their local community.
Community television is different than commercial.
Correct. Correct. So, I mean, so the example of there in Hawaii, I think, is profound because you are literally on an island, but you're also metaphorically on an island. You're on media islands, if you will, where media is coming from the mainland that may not necessarily be addressing local issues. Now, you know about the value of locality on Oʻahu, and you know that Oʻahu issues aren't sort of like uniform across the island. You also know that, say, for example, on the Northern Shore, the issues are going to be different than, say, in downtown Waikiki. You have that local knowledge that you can have the ability to be able to adapt for media production and consumption through the work that you're doing at Ōlelo in a way that I could never hear in Washington, D.C., or if I was running a network in Miami or London or who knows where, I would never be able to meet those local information needs. And I think that's one of the things that sort of underlines the need for local media across the country. You're kind of blessed in many respects in Hawaii because of the assets that are available.
What message can you give us here in Hawaii from the national level?
You have an important asset that needs to be protected. We're your partners on the national level trying to protect that voice. But it's really also up to your organizations and individuals in your community who value that voice to step up for it. So be mindful of it, protect it, cultivate that voice, because it doesn't necessarily just simply come from the air. It actually has to be cultivated and protected.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for those words of encouragement. We certainly will take them to heart.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to Island Focus and joining me in meeting Mike Wassenaar, who's President and CEO of the Alliance for Community Media. Aloha. With us today on Island Focus, I have the pleasure of talking with Jay April, who is President and CEO of Ō'ahu on the island of Maui. Hi, Jay.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Lyla. It's good to see you again after all these years.
Well, and particularly now when we're celebrating free speech and how, you know, how important that is to me, but also to community media. What are you folks doing on Maui?
Really, what we're trying to do now, especially since COVID hit, when we realized what a crisis that would be, you know, one of the things we've been trying to do for years is to create a island-wide, or actually when you think of Maui, it's 3 islands, a county-wide daily news program that's basically involves citizens using their phones to submit stories. And luckily for us, the technology is now here for everybody to do that. Everybody posts on Facebook, and they're all different kinds of technology now to move video around. So on March 20th, when the lockdown happened, we turned our entire staff into a daily news operation. And my executive assistant, a former Miss Filipina, Gina Miller, became the anchor. And a couple of the other people that worked here became reporters. And a lot of our volunteers out in the community became what we call Kuleana correspondents. And starting that day, March 20th, we started with coronavirus updates. About a week later, we had a daily half-hour news program that plays about 12 hours a day. We also cover daily news conferences from the mayor's office about coronavirus, giving people essential information and up-to-date and accurate information. We have an Ō'ahu app, and it's downloadable for free, and you can watch our news all over the world every single day, well, weekdays. We go up live at 4, and then we repeat at 7, and we repeat it at midnight and 9 and 10. But on the app, you can watch every single day. Yesterday, we had a couple of our staff members do a wonderful rendition of Imagine by John Lennon, because, you know, today's his birthday. It was just very uplifting. So it's a kind of a nice mix of uplifting, positive news, but also information that people need about coronavirus. It's been very exciting for us. And every day we try to seek out more correspondents. Like Lyla, you could send in your report from ʻŌlelo. That would be great. I mean, 2 minutes a week. That's what we'll give you a.
I appreciate, you know, your generosity, not just with ʻŌlelo, but the station is located on the island of Maui. And as you mentioned, the county of Maui also incorporates Molokai and Lanai. So being a tri-island station, how are Molokai and Lanai included in this?
Well, they're included every day. We have an office on Molokai, and Ō'ahu is extremely popular there because we're the electronic media for Molokai. So they get to contribute to the station, to the news, and we find out what's going on there. They find out what's going on here, and it's worked out really good. Lanai is a little bit more difficult because it's sort of like a fiefdom, you know, run by one person. It's incredibly unique and anywhere in the United States. But we get regular dispatches from there. But it's a little bit more challenging on Lanai because it's a whole different world. But we're here to service 3 islands separated by water, and that's not an easy task. But it's really cool. Everybody's included. So Maui Nui, we call it, is a pretty amazing place when it comes to the challenges with respect to news.
And the fact that you've been so innovative and inclusive, that is the essence of community media, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's different. You know, I mean, Facebook is evil. You know, 62% of people get their news from Facebook. I mean, think about that. I mean, it's the Wild West. And, you know, Zuckerberg, he doesn't care about you. He cares about harvesting your data. And he brags about that all the time. He'll leave a corporate meeting and he'll yell, "Domination," as he's walking out the door. So brick and mortar public access is so important. This kind of community media is really the last bastion of democratic media left, because we don't have to sell soap. This is not corporate media. It's non-corporate, free, uncensored media, and there's none of that left, really. Every other kind of media you can think about pretty much is corporatized.
When we all speak about free speech, what does that mean in terms of lay language?
Well, it's free speech if somebody doesn't shut you up. It's free speech if you can say what you want to say, obviously within limits. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You know, you should be polite. I mean, I kind of like the Reddit. People who are familiar with Reddit, that website, they have some really good content rules. You know, you got to be nice to each other. You got to be civil. But free speech means no one's telling you to shut up. No one's censoring your message because they want you to sell something or they want to spin it a certain way. Like, for instance, Fox. I mean, Fox is just a mouthpiece for, you know, for the president and for right-wing views. We'll take any views. We're not going to let you be mean to one another, but we will allow everyone to speak. That's the essence of free speech. Everyone can get up on that soapbox and say whatever they want. That's the important thing.
What words of encouragement can you give to our community, not just in Maui, but our whole state?
Just don't be afraid. You know, don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to exercise your creativity. Public access is a canvas. You know, you don't have to imitate broadcast TV. You don't have to put a perfect part in your hair and look like a mannequin to be on TV. You just have to speak from your heart. So if we have more people speaking from their heart and expressing their kuleana and their mana'o, then we're going to be fine. We just need to keep talking to each other, keep the conversation going.
Mahalo for taking the time to be with us, Jay. It was nice to see you again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us on Island Focus and having the pleasure of meeting Jay April, who is president and CEO of Akaku on Maui. Aloha. Mahalo for tuning in to Island Focus and joining me in meeting Jay Robertson, who is the Managing Director of Ho'ike on Kauai. Aloha, Jay.
Aloha and mahalo to you, Lyla. Thank you so much for having me on your very important program. Before we get started, I just want to say I really appreciate everything you do. These programs are so informative and they really bring a lot of information to the people on Kauai that we wouldn't normally get. So thank you.
And thank you for that compliment. You know, we're all in this business together.
Yes.
And as we recognize the importance and the necessity of free speech, maybe you can share with us a little bit about Ho'ike and what's happening on Kauai.
It's very interesting, and we are a totally unique island. Obviously, the COVID situation shut us down, but we responded extremely well. That prompted us to make sure that we continued to provide not only information, but resources to our community. So we really kind of changed our mode very quickly and rapidly. One, to become a chief proponent for the mayor and his objectives and how to get that information out. But for free speech, and we looked at this, it was interesting that at the same time, the Black Lives Matter issues were being brought up across the nation. I serve on the Inclusion, Equity, and Engagement Caucus for the Alliance for Community Media, which is really a principal architect on how do we bring more voices to the table and how do we understand more different people's perspectives and points of view, to share respect for that point of view, whether we agree with it or not, but to be able to listen to it. So we've initiated some programs here on Kauai that really foster that. We had some very special programming that we brought in that included the mayor, council members, community leaders, chief of police to discuss free speech, to discuss racial issues, and how can we become better people within our community. So we really took a very strong focus on providing that.
What I know to be true about you too is you honor the youth voices as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes. It's kind of funny because At one point, we had a prohibition about kids under 18 couldn't participate. And when I got the job, I kind of thought about it, and it seemed to me that I knew some 14-year-olds that were much more responsible than 30-year-olds that I knew. And so we immediately dropped that. We started working with the schools. We embraced the kids. We've had teen television. We think that young people have as important of a voice as a senior citizen, and they're equally needing to have an outlet, and that's what we hope to provide.
Well, and especially now, given the various means of communication, social media, maybe you can explain what those challenges are and how do we maintain the community voice through community media?
Well, that's another unique set about Kauai. While the rest of the world is all at Twitter or all into Facebook, we still are very basic in a lot of our habits. So cable television remains a very strong element on the island. We do use Facebook, we do use all the other social media sources, and the younger generation is really more adapted to that because of the technology. However, people tend to stick with community access and cable television. Over the past several months, we have been as busy as ever. We were able to open our studios and our facilities on June 1st, and we have been slammed ever since with all ages of people, both senior programs, youth programs, adults who are sharing their information. So we've seen an increase in activity here. We have a hard time limiting it because of the social distancing requirements, but we're finding more content is being developed and more stories are being told and more people are expressing them now because of the situation. And I'm so glad that this resource is available to these folks. And the fact that it reaches so many different segments and demographics is really remarkable.
I guess the foundation of this is they can trust the station. They can trust the story. They can trust you.
Yes, we've been here for nearly 30 years. We've all gone through some very tragic events, which brings us closer. Kauai is such a unique society. We're the ones that get slammed by the hurricanes, and it just brings us tighter together. We get devastated by floods and different occurrences, and that brings us tighter together. And because of that, we really share a unique situation on the island that I personally love. I couldn't live anywhere else.
What do you see are the challenges moving forward as, not just as Hawaii opens up after COVID, but what are some of the challenges for community media?
Well, I think first and foremost, and I've seen this across the board with nonprofits, it'll be funding. Having the necessary resources moving ahead to make sure that we can stay up with technology, stay up with habits and people's desires, the changing environments that we're in. So we're pretty stable and we run a good operation. That's one of my fortes, is making sure that we have the resources to be able to fund these programs. I see that as one of the primary issues. The secondary thing is probably keeping abreast of technological developments. The technology changes so rapidly, it's really difficult to be able to stay ahead of it. So we're always catching up in that regard.
Some closing encouragement to the community as we wrap up our conversation today.
Your voice is important, and this is a place that you can always share it. Hawaii's public education and government access centers are critical to the development and the building of community. I personally steal a lot from Ōlelo. I see the wonderful work that they do over there, and I copy their programs and their objectives to really bring folks together and share their identities.
Well, and in summary, let's say we're all in this together.
Yes.
So we're glad to share what we do, and certainly Hōʻike has much to offer us as well.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, and thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you for tuning into Island Focus and joining me in getting to know Jay Robertson, Managing Director for Hōʻike on Kauai. Aloha. I'm here today on Island Focus with Sanford Inouye, who's President and CEO of Ōlelo Community Media. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, Sanford.
Aloha, Lyla. Very happy to be here with you on Island Focus.
Well, as Island Focus is one of the signature programs of Ōlelo, and I'm very grateful to be part of this, Perhaps you can share what other adjustments have been made at the station. We used to film on location, and now we're doing virtual. What other changes have been made?
You know, Lyla, that's a great question because everyone's been affected by the COVID pandemic, right? With the shutdown starting in late March, pretty much all the way through summer and, just a few weeks ago. So at Ōlelo, we used to be doing this program, Island Focus, on premise at different locations throughout the island, having multiple guests being taped in a single day, but also highlighting the location that we're at. And that was a very great part of the program because people got to see not only our leaders in the community, but also where we are and learn a little bit more about the location and what they do, etc. I missed that. During the COVID situation, we needed to pivot because we couldn't go on premise anymore. And I have to hand it to my team here at Ōlelo, where in just a matter of a couple weeks, they developed a platform that we could do our broadcasts virtually and remotely, and thus gave birth to the new Island Focus format, where now you're at home doing this show. I'm in my office talking with you, and our crew is recording this program virtually and remotely. So we've been able to pivot not only with this program, but also with other programs during the summer. As you remember, the legislature had not adjourned until way into summer, right? And so they had two special committees related to COVID. And we were able to work with the legislature in having those hearings shown on Ōlelo. And the response from the public was tremendous. People wanted to hear directly from our leaders, our policymakers, to know more about what's going on. What are we going to be doing with respect to COVID? And what's the plans for the state of Hawaii moving forward? With this new platform that we developed, it gave us the opportunity to do more programming because it is simpler than being on premises and having the ability to reach more people remotely in terms of putting a program together. So with that, we pivoted and we're still doing this today. And I long for the day that we return to on-premises broadcasts. In the meantime, this works well and it provides the information that's relevant and timely to our viewers. So very happy that we were able to pivot and provide the program to our community at large.
And not only do we provide information and opportunities, to share what's going on with the community, the community also has, in terms of free speech, the access to share their own stories through our station. Maybe you could speak a little bit more about the power of free speech and how that guides our mission.
Ōlelo spawned from freedom of speech. It was the very beginning of community access, where people could stand on a soapbox on a street corner and say whatever they wanted, so long it was quote unquote legal. Community access is non-commercial, it's unfettered, it's not edited, and it's free speech. And it was provided by Congress back in 1984 to provide community access programming on cable systems throughout the country. What that empowered the entire community is the opportunity to really get trained on how to use equipment to create your content. Anything that you wanted to share to the community at large, you could do at Ōlelo. And free speech is so important to us today, I can't say enough, because it is one of our most treasured rights. This month, starting October 19th, we'll be celebrating the National Free Speech Week. Here at Ōlelo, we have a myriad of activities at our center at Māpunapuna that will showcase and engage with our clients and the community about the value of free speech, what you can do as an individual to create your story, unfettered, unedited, and share it to the community through Ōlelo.
We wrap up our conversation. What are some words of encouragement that you could give our community to keep on giving?
To our viewers, we couldn't do what we do without you, the community members. Our clients, our members, producers, we have thousands of community members like you who have joined Ōlelo, created their programs, and shared their stories on our cable channels. Those opportunities should be treasured and also utilized. We want you to engage with ʻŌlelo, Community Access, learn about what we do, take our training so that we can empower you to create your stories and share it to the greater community.
There are many challenges facing community media relative to freedom of speech and also connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
What are you folks doing among the islands to stay connected?
We're very fortunate in Hawaii to have 4 community access centers that are independent, but actually we're tied together because of our mission. So when we have a live broadcast, let's say from the state capitol, that live broadcast is fed directly live to the neighbor islands. They'll pick it up, and so that community members throughout the state will have the ability to view what's going on at the state capitol at the same time throughout the state. In addition to that, Akaku, Ho'ike, Naleo, and ʻŌlelo, we get together on a regular basis to talk about what's important to community access, what's going on in terms of our own communities, share best practices, and looking at our services and programs, and see where we can be better at what we do.
Thank you for sharing those words of encouragement, Sanford, and we will look forward to many more programs on all of our stations. Thank you.
Thank you, Lyla, for the opportunity to be with you on Island Focus. Very much appreciated.
Appreciate you being with us also on Island Focus as we've met Sanford Inoue, President and CEO of Ōlelo Community Media on Oʻahu. Aloha. Mahalo for being with us today on Island Focus. I'm Lyla Berg. Providing the community with opportunities for freedom of speech is the mission and dedication of our community access stations. On behalf of Island Focus crew and Ōlelo Community Media, we wish you aloha and malama pono. Be kind in our thoughts and let's be kind to one another. See you soon.